Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at The Gardens Between for the Nintendo Switch. And this is a game I'd actually requested a review code for back when it came out, but apparently the BGC just didn't quite rate. So now that it's on sale, we can go ahead and give it a review. But right after kicking the tires and lighting the fires, I realized this game isn't quite Tom Cruise's F-14 Tomcat, and in general just has a pretty slow pace. And as The Gardens Between isn't just an environmental puzzle game, it's also kind of narrative driven, the pace of the game affects the story. Or at least how quickly you uncover the story to discover what's really going on. And so throughout the duration of the 2.5 to possibly 3 hour experience that is The Gardens Between, most of the time you'll probably just realize that this is a story of two friends. And after dropping that epic bombshell of a reveal, we can get into the actual gameplay. The gameplay itself, I am happy to note, is actually fairly innovative, and it took me a little while to get a handle on it. Because while the mainstay of manipulating the environment in order to solve the puzzles is pretty much par for the course for any environmental puzzle game, one of the neat things about The Gardens Between is that you don't actually control the characters. Or I should say, you don't control the character's progression, you actually control the progression of time. And so the main avenue by which to play the game is merely spinning time forward or rewinding it backwards and letting the characters meander down their own paths. And while this might start to sound a little bit like a narrative-based walking sim, you do cause the characters to interact with certain elements of the environments, more than just the progression of time, with the main female lead carrying the light in some sort of storm lamp, which will essentially resolve itself as being the way to exit the level upon completion of the ascension to the mountain of each area. But the friend counterpart has other elements that they can interact with, such as certain series of bells which may cause certain flowers to bloom or close, or certain totems that will allow the manipulation of specific environmental elements. And I know that's actually kind of hard to grasp, because like I said, it took me a minute to get a feel for it myself. Because while the entirety of The Gardens Between does seem to be intrinsically linked to the flow of time, there are certain aspects of the game that seem to contradict it. And probably one of my favorite examples of this is the level where you have to actually saw off a board. And because this is fairly early and very straightforward, no, that's not a spoiler in any way, shape, or form. But the female character has to jump back and forth over a saw, moving the progression of time, but as she jumps on the oversized saw, every time she makes an impact, it's slowly cutting it off. And this makes a ramp for her counterpart. And so while time itself for both characters is moving back and forth, everything you're doing within time is constantly on a future trajectory. Otherwise though, that really is about all there is to it as far as game progression and character controls. Through the entirety of the game's 19 levels, you'll really just have to interact by controlling time forward or backward and occasionally interacting with an aspect of the environment. And so while you might expect there to be a continuous learning curve for such an innovative game mechanic, it's kinda all front-loaded, so once you get a handle on it, the game itself becomes much more passive and ambient. Which actually leads us further down the review into the presentation for The Gardens Between. Visually, obviously, the game is absolutely gorgeous, but there are a few lags and a few sticky spots between load scenes. And the audio presentation as well is really, really high quality, and the soundtrack alone makes it very tolerable if the game's pace seems a little slow. But other than that, there are some things a player might want to be aware of before diving into The Gardens Between, especially if you're thinking about buying it sans the sale price. And first and foremost of which is probably what I've mentioned several times already, is the pace of the game. Even for puzzle games, the pace of The Gardens Between is arguably slow, and the fact that you can only control time forward and backward and the characters continue moving at their own rates means you're probably going to encounter quite a bit of frustration because you can't actually make the characters run even if you know where they should go and what they should do. You're very much locked into a passive spectator role. And the other thing is the general mechanics of the game. They do have a bit of an initial learning curve, and it does seem really cool and neat and shiny and bright and fancy. But after the first 8 or 9 levels or so, when you get a good handle on manipulating time and you start understanding what elements you need to be watching out for, nothing about the game really changes. And so you might find yourself about level 10 or so, which is roughly halfway through the game, just kind of wanting to know what the end of the story is. Because once you understand the gaming mechanics to a T, there's really not much challenge left to be had. And so like I said, noting the visual and audio presentation, if you're not willing to, or if you don't enjoy playing through more passive ambient games, then the slow pace of the game might be intensified exponentially. Other than that though, and this probably is only for people playing it on the Switch, because I think it is available on other platforms, as I alluded to with the visuals, there are laggy load times. And there are some places where the frame just kind of jumps to catch up to where it probably should have been. And so in that sense, while the graphics, while the design of them is absolutely amazing and the color palette's gorgeous, there are some performance issues to be noted. And it kind of trips me out to say that because Gardens Between, I believe, used to actually be a mobile game. So I'm not really sure how it could have less performance on the Switch. But pushing away from the table and looking at the Gardens Between as an entire experience, as a full package, presentation-wise, it's absolutely gorgeous, and that is one of the things that's probably going to draw most players to it. And the mechanics were novel and unique, but for me personally, there just wasn't enough of the game, and I don't mean its length, because a 3-hour game for the indie market is pretty much par for the course. But the bright, shiny aspect of the new novel mechanics really lost its shine pretty early on. And I found myself just wondering, why am I playing the game? What is it about this relationship between these two people I even want to know? Which is a developer note toward nurturing player investment. That's kind of a must. We need to know why we're playing the game. But despite that, I can't say it's a negative experience, because I am a puzzle game fan at heart, and any new take on a genre is intrinsically interesting. But maybe the Gardens Between would be best suited for the gamer who really enjoys the narrative-based walking sims, the slower pace about discovery and exploration, not really about the solving of the puzzles or the adventure. But anyway, that does about wrap it up for the review of the Gardens Between, now for the Nintendo Switch. So if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a comment or a like to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. Because we do put out 2 reviews a week, and there are so many indie games out there, and new and unique ones coming out every single day, that chances are, whether it's an easy hard pass or an absolutely unforgettable gem, you're probably going to find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.